Well, friends, today we will be discussing about the next chapter. It is system of particles and rotational motion, and about the rotating bodies. So let us begin the discussion. So here we are having the first concept of center of mass. So in this, what will happen is basically till now we have in mechanics we have deal with those particles which in whose mass is considered as the mass of the body. Now, if say suppose if a system is or if a body is having more number of particles in it. So then how to deal with such type of bodies or how to deal with such type of objects will be a question. So in that case, we deal with this topic and we try to understand the generalizations which are made to the system of particles. So when a body is consisting of many particles, so then we cannot consider it single mass, and then we need to consider it's the center of mass. It is that particular point in the body where the entire mass of the system is supposed to be concentrated, and all external forces are acting on it at that particular position. Center of mass is basically calculated by the equation that is xcm, that is along x-axis, y-axis, z-axis, it will be different. So we are having the different equations to calculate it. So for along x-axis, it will be m1 x1 plus m2 x2 till mn xn for a number of particles divided by m1 plus m2 plus mn, that is the mass of each particle, that is n number of particles. In general, it is written as summation of I equals to 1 to n mi xi divided by capital M. Capital M is the mass of all the particles together. Similarly, for on y-axis and z-axis, the equations can be written in a similar manner. Now, say suppose if there are only two particles and its center of mass we are supposed to calculate, and those two particles are lying along any one of the axes, that either it may be along x-axis or y-axis or z-axis. So in that case, what will happen is the center of mass will be given by m1 x1 plus m2 x2 divided by m1 and m1 plus m2, where m1 and m2 if they are equal to m, so in that case it will be equals to x1 plus x2 divided by 2. So this is how we get our equation of center of mass. Moving further, so basically many of the students will be having the confusion between center of mass and center of gravity, cm and cg. The center of mass describes the motion of the entire system, and center of gravity describes the stability of the body. So center of gravity, when you try to find out in a body, it gives you basically the stability of that body. Center of mass and center of gravity coincide for small bodies as gravitational field is uniform. When we consider a small body or small sized object, so in that what will happen is center of mass and center of gravity will be coinciding, because in that region, since the body is small, the gravitational field is uniformly acting at all the points. So now velocity of center of mass. So when we get the equation of position, as we have seen in this equation, we are getting the equation for position of center of mass. So when we differentiate this equation with respect to time, so then we get the instantaneous velocity of the center of mass, which will be given by v cm equals to m1 v1 plus m2 v2 plus so on till m1 vn divided by total mass, that is capital M. So now here Vcm will be equal to P system. Now here P system shows the momentum of the entire system, because P1 V1 will be the momentum of first body, P2 M2 V2 will be the momentum of second body, and Mn Vn will be the momentum of nth body. So similarly, what will happen is you are having the momentum of the entire system as P system divided by total mass, that is capital M. So where P system is the total linear momentum of the center of mass. Further, we can differentiate this velocity equation once again to obtain the acceleration of center of mass. So differentiating Vcm with respect to time, we get Acm as Acm equals to m1a1 plus m2a2 plus mnan, so on, till divided by total mass m. So Acm will be equal to, now if we consider this equation m1a1, so m1 is the mass of first particle and a1 is the acceleration of the first particle. So it gives us the f1, that is force acting on that particle. Similarly, M2A2 will give you the force acting on the second particle, and when you substitute F1 plus F2 plus so on till Fn, it gives us the net external force acting on that particle. So ACM will be equal to summation of F external divided by M. So where F external is the vector sum of forces acting on the particles of a system. The center of mass of a system of particles lies in the region where majority of the mass of the system lies. So where the majority of the mass is lying, in that particular region itself, the center of mass will be lying. The center of mass of a body may lie outside the body or on the body. So it is not necessary that center of mass would always lie where there is mass. So sometimes it may lie outside the body. For example, the center of mass of a ring lies at its center, not on its body. So when you consider a ring or a bangle or any substance which is in the form of ring, we observe that the center of mass will be acting at that particular point where there is no mass itself. Hence, it may lie outside the body also. For a symmetrical body of uniform density, the center of mass lies at its geometrical center. So, symmetrical body, when we consider a ratio of uniform density, so it is observed that the geometrical center will be the center of mass for such bodies. For a circular groove, the center of mass lies at its center. For a homogeneous sphere, center of mass lies at its geometrical center because of its symmetry. The sum of moment of mass about its center is zero. That is, summation of r dm will be equal to zero. For an equilateral triangle, the center of mass is at its centroid. So when you consider an equilateral triangle, the center of this triangle will be the centroid where the three perpendicular bisectors meet with each other. Hence, at that particular point, the center of mass will be lying out. If two circular disks of radii r1 and r2 of the same material are kept in contact, then the distance of the center of mass of the system from center of disk of radius r1 is given by. As you can see in the diagram, so two rings are kept in contact. So one distance radii is r1, the other distance is r2, and when you are calculating the center of mass, so center of mass from the center of the disk of radius r1. So then it is given by xcm, which is equal to r2 square divided by r1 plus r2 divided by r1 plus r2, r1 square plus r2 square. So this is how we calculate the center of mass at this point. Moving further, if the two spheres of radii r1 and r2 of the same material are kept in contact, then the distance of center of mass of the system from center of a sphere of radius r1 is given by. So xcm will be equal to r2 cube divided into r1 plus r2 divided by r1 cube plus r2 cube. So this is how we get the center of mass. So again, it is from the center of a sphere of radius r1. So center of mass can be accelerated only by net external force. So if you want to accelerate center of mass, we require net external force acting on it, or else the internal forces will not be responsible for producing the acceleration here. Internal forces cannot accelerate the center of mass or change the state of center of mass. In the absence of external force, the center of mass of a system is at rest if the center of mass is initially at rest, and if the system is moving with a constant velocity, it continues with the same velocity to move further. This will happen only when there are no external force acting over it. Now shift in the center of mass when a small portion of mass is removed from a uniform body is. Now sometimes what will happen is we remove a particle from a center of the entire system, and then we see there is shift in the position of the center of mass. So then it is given by x shift, which is equal to a mass removed into t divided by m total minus m removed. So mass of total mass minus removed mass. So it will be how we will be calculating its value. Further, out of a uniform circular disk of radius r, if a circular sheet of radius r is removed, then the center of mass of the remaining part shifts by a distance x equals to r square t divided by r square minus r square, or x equals to m2d divided by m1 minus m2. So one equation is in the terms of mass, the other equation will be in terms of radii. Okay. So here where d is the distance of the center of the smaller part from the center of the original disk. So the distance between the center of smaller part from the original disk will be given by d. Moving further, if a circular portion is removed from the edge, then the shift is maximum, and x shift will be equal to r square divided by capital R plus small r, or x will be equal to m2d divided by m1 minus m2. So if a circular portion of diameter r is removed from a uniform circular plate of radius r from one edge, then shift in the center of mass x shift will be equal to r by 6, where r is the diameter. So moving further, out of uniform solid sphere of radius r, if a sphere of radius r is removed, then the center of mass of the remaining part shifts by. So this is a standard numerical wherein we consider a uniform solid sphere of radius capital R, and from that we remove a small sphere of radius small r, and then the center of mass shifts within the sphere, and it is given by r cube d divided by capital R cube minus small r cube, where d is the distance of the smaller sphere from the center of the original sphere. Its spherical portion is removed from the edge, then the shift is maximum and x shift will be equal to. So shift is, in this case will be maximum when the portion is removed from edge. So then it will be small r cube divided by capital R square plus small r square plus capital R into small r. If a spherical portion of diameter r is removed from a uniform sphere of radius capital R from one edge, then the shift in the center of mass x shift will be equal to r divided by 14. So when a triangular portion is removed from one edge of a square plate of side A, as shown in the figure, then the shift in center of mass is given by x shift equal to A divided by 9, where A is supposed to be the length of the square plate, length of the edge of a square plate. So then it will be shifted by A by 9 times. Moving further, when a triangular plate is removed from one edge of an rectangular plate of length L and breadth B, so then the shift in the center of mass is given by A by 9, where A is the length of the rectangular uh, frame. Further, when a shell is in flight explodes, so sometimes there will be a shell which will explode during its flight. So in that case, the acceleration of center of mass before and immediately after explosion will be ACM equals to G downward. So ACM is the acceleration of the center of mass. Immediately after the acceleration, it will be shifted to G, which will be acting in downward direction. The center of mass of all the fragments will continue to move along the same trajectory as along the fragments are still in the space. So the center of mass of all fragments will be moving along the same trajectory, although the particles or the fragments will be moving in different directions. If all the fragments reach the ground simultaneously, the center of mass will complete the original trajectory. So when all the particles will reach simultaneously, then the center of mass will also reach the original trajectory complete. If some of the fragments reach the ground earlier than the other fragments, then the acceleration of the center of mass changes. So it means now if the one fragment is reaching earlier when compared to the other fragments, or this may happen, so in that case the acceleration of center of mass has changed. Or else if they reach simultaneously, then the acceleration will remain same. If two masses starting from rest move under mutual force of attraction towards each other, then they meet at the center of mass. So we observe that there will be many particles which will be moving under the mutual force with respect to each other, and when they move towards each other, then they meet actually at the center of mass. In the above case, VCM will be equal to 0 and ACM will be equal to 0. So velocity of center of mass will be 0 and acceleration of center of mass will be 0. If the two particles are m1 and m2 and their velocities are v1 and v2, then m1 v1. So here we observe that the momentum is conserved, but they are in opposite direction. So m1 v1 will be equal to minus of m2 v2. If the two particles have acceleration a1 and a2, then ACM will be equal to 0. So m1 a1 will be equal to minus of m2 a2. So if s1 and s2 are the distances traveled before they meet, m1 s1 will be equal to m2 s2. This is how we observe the changes in this case. Now coming to the next part, that is principle of movements. So according to the principle of movements, a body will be in rotational equilibrium if the algebraic sum of all the moments of the force acting on the body about a fixed point is 0. So F1 D1 equals to F2 D2. So load into load arm will be equal to effort into effort arm. So we know very well that sometimes when we want to lift a heavy object, we take a help of a small object and we try to lift it. So where we are trying to lift, we call it as load. Where we are applying the force, we call it as effort. So the stone in between, from that we will observe that the one end will be towards the load, and that arm we call it as load arm, and the other arm towards our application of force, where we are applying the force, we call it as effort arm. So now the ratio F1 by F2 is called as mechanical advantage of the lever, and that is the load lifted divided by effort applied. So load by effort, when you calculate, it is called as mechanical advantage. So here principle of movement says you that load into load arm will be equal to effort into effort arm. So it is equal to D2 divided by D1. The rotation of rigid body, when a rigid body rotates about a fixed axis, following parameters are needed to describe. So now we are entering into the rotational dimensions of a rigid body, because when it is rotating, we cannot describe it by using linear components. So we require the angular components. So first is angular velocity. It is defined as angular displacement by time. Further, it can rotate in two directions. So one is in the clockwise, the other will be in anti-clockwise direction. The body may rotate it. Hence, we are having the direction of the angular velocity in the direction of along the axis of rotation. So along the axis of rotation, its direction will be lying out. So further, angular acceleration, it is the rate of change of angular velocity, and it will be given by alpha equals to d omega by dt, where omega is the angular velocity. When a body is moving in circular path, that doesn't necessarily mean that there will be only angular acceleration to it. So there will be tangential acceleration acting over it, and then the rate of change of the speed of a point on the rigid body is called as angular acceleration, and it is denoted by alpha. So alpha t, its tangential acceleration, will be equal to r into alpha. That is the radius into linear acceleration. Angular acceleration alpha. Here r is the distance of the particle or point of from the axis of rotation. The distance of the particle or point from axis of rotation, we take it as r. So if a body is supposed to be in a circular path, so we call it as radius also sometimes. So then we are coming to the next part. It is moment of inertia. It is the opposition offered by a rigid body to its state of rest or of uniform rotational motion. So the resistance offered in the case of rigid body in uniform rotational motion, we call it as moment of inertia. We are having angular momentum. It is defined as L equals to I omega, where I is the moment of inertia and omega is the angular velocity. The product of these two, we call it as angular momentum. Further, torque is the substitute for the force. So we are having a coupled force which will be acting in the on the body in two different points. So we call it as torque. It is the action of a force which produces a change in its state of rest or of uniform rotational motion. So when the force is acting in such a way that it is producing rotational motion, we call that force as torque. From Newton's second law, we have tau equals to dl by dt. That is, external force will be equal to rate of change of angular momentum. So it is tau equals to I alpha. So this is the equation which we obtain here, because L will be equal to I into omega, and d omega by dt will be alpha. So if the force acts on a rigid body at a point whose position vector with respect to the axis of rotation is r, then the torque is given by torque tau equals to r cross f. So this is the actual definition or equation of torque. So it is defined as the cross product of r and f. So where r is the position vector with respect to the axis of rotation, and f is the force acting over it, or it is also written as f cross, perpendicular distance from the axis of rotation. So this is another equation. So for uniform angular acceleration, we have different kinematic equations which we write it down. We are having our three basic kinematic equations as v equals to u plus at, then s equals to ut plus half at square, and v square minus u square equals to 2as. So we are having the same sort of equations here also. So omega will be equal to omega naught plus alpha t, theta equals to omega naught t plus half alpha t square, and omega square will be equal to omega naught square plus 2 alpha theta. So here, if you observe, these are all rotational terms. Theta is the angular displacement, alpha is the angular acceleration, omega naught is the initial angular velocity, and omega is supposed to be the final angular velocity. So this is how we obtain the equations. Now angular momentum and its conservation. So here we are having angular momentum as mvr plus I omega. So m into vcm into r. M is the mass, total mass of all the particles. Vcm is the velocity of center of mass, and r is supposed to be the distance, the average distance. So plus I omega. I is the moment of inertia, and omega is supposed to be the angular velocity. So conservation of angular momentum in an isolated system, no external torque, the angular momentum of the system is conserved. The torque external will be equal to dl by dt. So here, when the torque external acting on a particle will become zero, it means dl by dt will be equal to zero, and L becomes constant. So it says us when there are torque external torque acting on the particle will become zero, or the system of particles will become zero. So then the angular momentum of the particle or system of particles will remain constant. So now applications you can go through before and after you can go through. So disk moment of inertia L1 equals to I omega, takes two particles at diametrically opposite points. L2 equals to I plus 2 mr square into omega dash. So omega dash equals to I omega into I plus 2 mr square. Moving further, effect of change in radius of Earth on its time period. So angular momentum of Earth is L equals to I omega, which is equal to constant. So L will be equal to 2 by 5 mr square into 2 pi by t. So 2 by 5 mr square is supposed to be the moment of inertia of a spherical body, and 2 pi by t is supposed to be the omega and time period relation. So here we are having it as t proportional to r square if m remains constant. So if r becomes half, then the time period will become 1/4, that is 24 by 4, 6 hours. So L will be equal to 2 by 5 mr square into 2 pi by t, which is equal to 2 by 5 t into 4 by 3 pi r cube into r square into 2 pi by t. So t is proportional to r to the power 5 if d remains constant. So if r becomes half, then the time period will become 3/4, that is to 24 by 32, which is equal to 0.75 hours. So this is basically the relation. So when m remains constant and when d remains constant, so what will happen to the R, and how does R vary with time period? So time period and R variation we can see from these two relations. Rotational kinetic energy. Consider a rigid body rotating about an axis with angular velocity omega. Various particles of the body are all rotating on a circle with radius r1, r2 with angular velocity omega dash, and the total kinetic energy is given by. So the kinetic energy of a rotating body will be given by half I omega square, where I equals to m1 into r1 square plus m2 into r2 square plus so on, and is called as moment of inertia. And 1 by 2 I omega square is supposed to be the kinetic energy of rotation of body. So this is how we obtain it. Now coming to the concept of moment of inertia. A body free to rotate about an axis opposes any change in its state or rest or of uniform motion. This inherited property of the body is called moment of inertia. The moment of inertia is in rotating bodies, the analog of mass in linear or translational motion. Basically, when we define moment of inertia, we define it as the opposition offered in its change of state or of rest or of uniform rotational motion. And here it is analogous to the mass in linear and translational motion. For system of particles, I equals to summation of I equals to 1 to n. Mi into Ri square is the equation for moment of inertia. The Mi is the mass of the ith particle, and Ri is the radius of the ith particle. So for rigid bodies, moment of inertia of a rigid body about any axis of rotation, mathematically I equals to integral dm into r square. So moment of inertia of 2 point masses about their center of mass is given by. So let m1 and m2 be the two masses distant r from each other, and r1 and r2 be the distance of their center of mass from m1 and m2 respectively. Then, so we are having this equation, that is r1 plus r2 will be equal to r. So m1 and r1 will be equal to m2 r2. R1 will be equal to M2 divided by M1 plus M2 into R, and R2 will be equal to M1 divided by M1 plus M2 into R, and I equals to M1 R1 square plus M2 R2 square. So I will be equal to M1 M2 divided by M1 plus M2 into R square. It is equal to mu R square. Moving further, so there are two theorems in order to calculate the moment of inertia about any axis. The first theorem is parallel axis theorem. So according to this, the moment of inertia of a body about an axis equal to the sum of moment of inertia about the center of mass and the product of mass in and the distance of the axis from the center of mass. So this is how we obtain it. I equals to ICM plus MD square. So then ICM is the moment of inertia of about the center of mass, and I is the moment of inertia about the parallel axis, and M is the mass of the body, and D is supposed to be the distance, perpendicular distance between the parallel axis. So this is how we calculate the moment of inertia in according to the parallel axis theorem. Then according to the perpendicular axis theorem, we calculate it in plane regular lamina. Say suppose if you are having three axes x, y, and z, then we define the moment of inertia about the third axis, that is Iz, will be equal to sum of moment of inertia about the x and y axis, perpendicular axis, mutually perpendicular axis. So hence Iz will be equal to Ix plus Iy. So this is how it is perpendicular axis theorem, and this is used to solve them and calculate the moment of inertia about perpendicular axis. So parallel axis theorem and perpendicular axis theorem help us to calculate the moment of inertia about different axes. Now there are some standard results which are indicated in this tabular column. So moment of inertia and radius of gyration. We will learn about radius of gyration in our further slides. So it is, say suppose if you consider a circular ring, so about an axis perpendicular to the plane mr square, then about a diametric axis of half mr square. So about an tangential to the rim, it is 2 mr square. So about an axis tangential to the rim and lying on the plane of the ring, so it is 3 by 2 mr square. So these are all different cases which we obtain. Similarly, we are having the circular disc about an axis passing through the center, it is half mr square. About the diametric axis, it is mr square by 4. About an axis tangential to the rim and lying on the plane of the disc is pi by 4 mr square. So about an axis tangential to the rim and perpendicular to the plane of the disc is 3 by 2 mr square. Further, when you consider solid sphere, so you are having it as 2 by 5 mr square about the axis of passing through diameter, and then we are having about a tangent to the sphere, it will be 7 by 5 mr square. Hollow sphere, when we consider, it will be 2 by 3 mr square about a diametric axis passing through the center of mass, and about the tangential and the axis of rotation, we are having it as 5 by 3 mr square. Moving further, so in a rectangular plate, we are having it as mb square by 12, where b is supposed to be the length, and ma square by 12, when where a is supposed to be the length. So about an axis passing through the center of mass and perpendicular to side B, perpendicular to side A, we get this equation. Now if it is perpendicular to the plane, then it will be m by 2 m by 12 into a square plus b square. So this is how we get the equation. In a cube along the center of mass, we get it as ma square by 6, where is the length of side, and then further we get the energy distribution table for different rolling bodies. So when a body rolls, so we are having different changes in the energy, kinetic energy. So here he has given you, say suppose a ring and a cylindrical shell. So k square by r square, basically this ratio is 1 here. Then translational kinetic energy half mv square, and rotational is given by half mv square into k square by r square, which is again half mv square. And total kinetic energy is half mv square into 1 plus k square plus r square. So this is how again we obtain it as mv square. So here kt by kn, when we consider, that is kinetic energy, the ratio of total kinetic energy in translational motion divided by kinetic energy, total kinetic energy. So it will be giving you 50%, 1 by 2. Then kr by kn is again 50%, 1 by 2. Similarly, for a disk and a solid cylinder, we can calculate it is half mv square, 1 by 4 mv square, and 3 by 4 mv square. It is 2 by 3 and 1 by 3 is the ratio. Solid sphere, it will be half mv square, 1 by 3 mv square, 5 by 6 mv square, so which is 3 by 5 and 2 by 5. Then hollow sphere, it will be 1 half mv square, 1 by 3 mv square, and 5 by 6 mv square, which is 3 by 5 and 2 by 5. So this is the ratio in which the energy is acting there. Moving further, rolling on an inclined plane. So whenever a body rolls over an inclined plane, so here it acquires both linear and angular speeds, and hence the kinetic energy of translation and theta of rotation will change here. So by conservation of mechanical energy, mgh will be equal to mgh will be equal to half mv square into 1 plus k square plus by r square. So this shows us that initially there will be only potential energy. So then it will be converted into rotational and translational kinetic energy. So finally we obtain this equation, which is half mv square into 1 plus k square by r square. So velocity at the lowest point we will be equal to root of 2gh divided by 1 plus k square by r square. And acceleration in motion from equation v square plus u square equals to 2as, where u is equal to 0, s will be equal to h divided by sine theta, and v will be equal to root of 2gh by 1 plus a square plus r square. We get it as a equals to g sine theta divided by 1 plus k square by r square. So we derived this equation in our previous class in the last year. Coming to the time of descent, the time required for the body to come down. So by substituting u equals to 0 in the equation v equals to u plus at, we get the equation for time t, which is equal to 1 by sine theta into root of 2h by g into 1 plus k square by r square. From the above expression, it is clear that v is proportional to 1 divided by root of 1 plus k square by r square. Acceleration is proportional to 1 divided by 1 plus k square by r square, and t is proportional to 1 root of 1 plus k square by r square. Here the factor k square by r square is the measure of moment of energy of a body, and its value is constant for a given shape of a body, and does not depend upon the mass and radius of the body. So velocity, acceleration, and time of descent all depends upon k square by r square. Lesser the moment of inertia of the rolling body, lesser will be the value of. So greater will be its velocity and acceleration, and lesser will be the time of descent. So we obtain the value of velocity, acceleration, and time, which is dependent upon k square by r square in the following. So if a solid and hollow body of same shape are allowed to roll down on an inclined plane, then a solid body will reach the bottom first with greater velocity. If a ring, cylinder, disc, and sphere runs a race by rolling on an inclined plane, then the sphere will reach the bottom first with greatest velocity, while ring get at the last with the least velocity. So this the result has come on the conclusion that velocity depends upon 1 by root of k, 1 plus k square by r square. So if angle of inclination has no effect on velocity, but time of descent and acceleration depend on it if the bodies are released from the same height. So if the bodies are released from the same height, then theta will not be varying much, but time, since it is depending upon sine theta, so it will change. Moving further, velocity is proportional to theta naught, time is proportional to theta to the power minus 1, and acceleration is proportional to theta. So if a solid sphere, hollow sphere, disc, cylinder, and ring, hollow cylinder are allowed to roll down from the top of an inclined plane simultaneously, then solid sphere reaches the ground first and the ring reaches last. The order of reaching the ground is solid sphere, disc, hollow sphere, and then the ring. So solid sphere will reach first, then the ring will be reaching the last. So this is how the equation is. So rolling, sliding, and falling. So root of 2gh, velocity will be given by root of 2gh divided by 1 plus k square by r square. The acceleration is g sine theta divided by 1 plus k square by r square. And time is 1 by sine theta into root of 2h by g into 1 plus k square by r square. Sliding, root p2gh g sine theta 1 by sine theta into root of 2h by g. And falling, it is again root 2gh g into root of 2h by g. So this is how we calculate it. So this last falling case we have calculated in the chapter called as motion in a plane, motion in 2D. And sliding and rolling we have calculated in this chapter. So basically these are given in NCERT textbook as numericals. So once we solve it, we get these final equations as such. Moving further now, comparison between the translatory motion and rotational motion. So here there are few parameters: linear displacement, linear velocity, and wherever you are having linear terms, it is replaced by angular inflationary. So you are having mass, which is moment of inertia, linear momentum, angular momentum, force, torque, work will remain same, but the equation will change here. Kinetic energy remains same. Here it will be linear, here it will be rotational. The equation is in the same format, but the parameters are different. The work energy theorem will remain same, but the parameters will be changing here: power and then impulse. So equations of motion, the format of the equations will remain same. Only thing is there will be change in the parameters. So where there are translatory motion parameters, they will be replaced by rotational motion parameters. Now this is an important aspect: motion in a vertical circle. Already we have dealt this in our previous chapter, that is uh, laws of motion. Once again we are going through it here because it is described as numerical in this chapter. So when a body is to move along a vertical plane, it should have a certain critical velocities at various points. Tension in string also changes from point to point. Tension will be maximum when the body is at the lower position, and it will be zero when it is at the highest position. So in the given diagram, at A, tension will be maximum; at B, tension will be minimum. If the body has a velocity less than the critical velocity, body cannot complete vertical circle. So it requires certain minimum velocity after which for which the body will be completing the vertical circle. But if at all there will be the critical velocity which will be less than the velocity with which the body is moving is less than the critical velocity, then it will not be able to complete the vertical circle. So consider a body of mass m tied to one end of the string be whirled in a vertical circle of radius r in a vertical plane. For just completing vertical circle, velocity at the lowest point A will be equal to V equals to root of 5 gr. So then velocity at the highest point V is Vb equals to root of gr, and the velocity at the horizontal position C or D will be equal to root of 3 gr. So for the body to complete the vertical circle, tension in the string at the lowest point will be Ta, which is greater than or equal to 6 mg. Then at the highest point, Tb equals to less than or equal to 0. At horizontal point, it will be less than or greater than or equal to 3 mg. So this is how we obtain it when you consider the ratio of velocities Va is to Vb is to Vc or Vd. When we get it as root 5 is to root 1 or root 5 is to 1 is to root 3. So when a body moves along a vertical circle with uniform speed, difference in the tension in the string when the body is at lowest and topmost position is equal to twice the weight of the body. The difference will be equal to twice the weight. When a body just moves in a vertical circle, its total energy only is constant. Its speed, linear velocity, linear momentum, angular velocity, potential energy, kinetic energy, centrifugal force, tension in the string, all are variable. So only thing that remains constant is total energy. Other than that, all the other parameters will be varying when a body is moving in a vertical circle. Fine. So this is all about your system of particles and rotational motion. Thank you.